Good afternoon. This is Stephen Lewis. I'll be talking to you about one of my sources, my secondary sources for my research paper, which is going to be the impact of early American Christians on the abolitionist movement. For the essay and secondary source that I'm looking at today is Jeffrey Plank's essay, Quakers as Political Players in Early America. It's published in the William and Mary Quarterly. It's a secondary source intervention that asks readers to stop treating Quakers as morally exceptional figures floating above their time and instead to analyze them as historically situated political actors. Plank's central move is historiographical. He warns that Quaker history is often narrated as a comforting story of people who were ahead of their time, and he replaces the celebratory framing with a more analytically useful question. How did Friends actually wield influence inside systems defined by coercion, commerce, slavery, and institutional constraint? In other words, he reframes Quaker politics less as righteous principle triumphing over circumstances and more as political practice, negotiation, coalition building, and strategic positioning that could generate real outcomes while still implicating Quakers in the compromises and violences of their world. One major strength of Plank's essay is conceptual clarity. He pushes us toward an understanding of politics as something that happens not only through formal offices or levers of power, but through the constant management of relationships, reputations, legal opportunities, and factional divisions. That framing helps explain why Quakers could matter in places where they were persecuted, marginalized, or formally excluded. Instead of measuring influence by whether they held power, Plank treats influence as relational and situational. It appears when institutional authority is divided, when toleration regimes are contested, or when local elites are susceptible to social pressure. This is a sophisticated, methodical stance because it maps well onto early American political culture, which was rarely centralized and often depended on informal networks as much as statutes. Plank also strengthens his argument by operating comparatively, moving across Massachusetts, the Carolinas, and the early national political sphere to show that Quaker politics was adaptive rather than uniform, shaped by the specific political ecology of each region. A second strength is his treatment of moral complexity, especially around slavery and reform. Plank reviews a simplistic binary where Quakers are either heroic abolitionists or hypocrites who failed. Instead, he shows how emancipation politics could be both consequential and compromised at the same time. Interracial activism, petitioning, and legal strategies created pressure and precedents, yet many Quakers involved in these efforts were enmeshed in gradualism, paternalism, and even slaveholding. This is an intellectually honest posture that improves historical explanation. It also models how to make normative judgments responsibly rather than using morality to flatten the past. Plank uses it to identify tensions that drove real political decisions, what people were willing to do, what they avoided saying, and what coalition partners could tolerate. In that sense, the essay's interpretive strength is also ethical. It doesn't sanitize and it doesn't sneer, it historicizes. At the same time, the essay has clear limitations that matter when we assess it as a secondary source. First, it is intentionally a synthesis, more of a programmatic forum essay than an archival monograph, and that means its evidentiary posture is necessarily light. Planck's claims are persuasive, but he often relies on the authority and findings of the companion scholarship as he is introducing rather than building the case through extended primary source quotation and close reading. That makes the piece excellent for framing a research agenda, but weaker as a standalone evidentiary demonstration. Second, the breadth that makes the essay compelling can also compress important direct distinctions by moving quickly across regions and decades. The analysis sometimes treats Quaker political behavior as a coherent repertoire without fully unpacking internal differences. Class, gender, meeting discipline, local economic interests that could produce divergent political choices among friends. In a longer study, we would expect more sustained attention to which Quakers acted under what authority and with what internal opposition. Finally, there is a subtle methodical risk that comes with Planck's corrective. In pushing against sanctification, the essay could be misread as implying that complicity conceals significance. Planck himself avoids that mistake, but readers have to hold two truths together. Quakers can be politically effective and morally compromised, and those are not mutually exclusive. The best way to use Planck's essay, then, is as a high-level interpretive map, one that sharpens our questions, complicates our categories, and points us back towards deeper primary source work rather than as a comprehensive archive-driven account. Overall, Jeffrey Planck offers a strong secondary source contribution precisely because he clarifies the stakes of interpretation. Quakers were not timeless heroes, but political players operating within and sometimes helping to reproduce the structures of early American power.